I mentioned how Baron Dahlbrock just said that he is an atheist, and he kept explaining that atheists are people who they're not buying the bullshit. That's all it is. Yeah, that you're telling me the story, and I'm saying, oh, maybe that's true, and maybe it isn't. But I'm not going to believe it. I'm not going to say that I know that it's false when I don't know. But I don't believe that it's true either. I don't believe that's an atheist.
Yeah.
Now, within the category of atheist, you can be an anti-theist, as I am, or you can be agnostic, as I used to be for a long time. But then somebody pointed out to me the same thing, that that there are not fairies living in your asshole. For the same reasons, do you know that there is no God? And I've realized, that's right. But what happened with the agnostic thing, and this confused everybody, was that Darwin's bulldog, Thomas Huxley, was irritated by people in his day when they were finding evidence of evolution, which of course completely contradicted the Christian doctrine, biblical literalism. So they were saying that it was proof against God, and therefore they know there is no God. And Huxley thought that was an irrational argument because, technically it is. It does disprove, the biblical literalists, but there are other versions of God that are a little loftier than that and can't be, chopped down quite so easily. So Huxley didn't understand what atheism meant because he's dealing with people who don't know what atheism means. And he didn't know what Gnostic meant either. But he creates this word agnostic, which consequently doesn't make a lot of sense, where he says he doesn't have the belief that God exists, which is atheism technically. And he doesn't have the belief that God does not exist either. And the interesting thing about that is everybody thought that, well, if agnostic means that you don't believe that God does not exist, that means that atheists believe that God does not exist. So he redefined atheism by creating a new word.
Interesting.
But the fact is it didn't mean that ever. I mean, if you go back to Webster's 1828 dictionary, which predates Huxley's invention of the word agnostic, the definition says that atheism already was a lack of belief that there is a God. So It was never belief that there is no God. It was never that. It never meant that. But a handful of philosophers get a hold of this agnostic thing, and they like to make things unnecessarily complicated. So if you have a belief, or if you don't have a belief in X, well, then that means you have a belief in not X. And then they try to just make things as intricate and complicated as it can possibly be until it gets absurd. So, atheism, according to philosophers, and you get to any academic philosophy website, just Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy or the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy, both of them say that atheism is a belief that there is no God. But every atheist in the world, other than philosophers, says, no, we just don't buy your bullshit. We just don't believe there is a God. That's it. Yeah. So in practical application, we have the entire universal atheist movement, and I'm a representative of American Atheists. I was a president of Atheist Alliance of America. I do things in association with many other atheist organizations, all of them, thousands of people identifying as not having a belief in God. They put their definition. Atheism means one thing. We don't believe you. We don't believe in a God. Not that we necessarily believe there is no God, just that we don't believe there is a God. And the philosophers always get upset and say, well, shut up, dog. The philosophers always get upset and say, well, that's not utilitarian. No, your definition is not utilitarian. Well, you've redefined it to control the narrative. No, you're literally the ones that have redefined it. In the 1800s, you did the arbitrary revision. So they do a lot of projection. I'm using the original, dominant, and still currently consistent, utilitarian, practical, common working definition. And the philosophers have their navel-gazing confusion, I guess. Their definition does nothing but start arguments.
Yeah.
And it has no practical application beyond that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I say this after having argued with a shit ton of philosophers about it, all of whom want to tell me how I'm ignorant or I'm lying or, well, we have a degree in philosophy, so you don't know what you're talking about. But then I prove with their own sources that I'm right. And then what are you going to do?
I heard, I remember many, many years ago seeing a video about Christopher Hitchens talking about, someone asked him about that. What's the difference between being an agnostic and an atheism? I can't remember exactly what he said, but it's basically something along those lines.
He said he's not just an atheist, he's an anti-theist.
Yeah, he's an anti-theist. Yeah.
Yeah. And then he went on to say that the reason he's an anti-theist is not just that he has a belief that there is no God, but that religion is inherently evil.
Correct. Yeah, that was the first time I'd heard that term, actually, and I get it. I remember I used to tell friends, Patrick, well, why don't you believe in God? I'd say, well, it's not about if I believe in God or not. It's just if, let's just say there was a God. Okay, let's say you're right and there was a God. I'm not going to worship him anyway. I don't care. He's a creator. That's sort of the position I took. Like, why am I, just because he created, I'm supposed to bow down, get on a knee and worship this person, and I'm supposed to thank him for the privilege of doing it. That's something also I find odd about religion. So forget the idea that God exists or not. Why are we getting on our knees? Why are we worshiping? Why is that it's such a magical thing to do? I don't get that aspect of it either.
I've had a number of religious fundamentalists ask me that question. If we could prove that there was a God, would you worship him? I say no.
Yeah, that's what I say. Fuck no.
I can know that there's a God. I can know that there's this unjust, tyrannical despot who's going to punish me for thinking. Well, just for thinking. The despot is going to punish me for any thoughts that I have, any kind of questions, any kind of ambitions, whatever it is. Because all the believers want to do is get all slave lovey about something. Any being worthy of worship would not want to be worshipped.